This is False Start, college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host tonight, Cody Williams, and I'm not joined by John Bueller, as you can obviously see. Flying solo like a cup tonight after a pretty wild finish to conference championship Saturday. Honestly, you look back at Friday night, you look earlier today on Saturday, and didn't seem like we were shaping up for the most exciting day of college football. We had Arizona State completely blow the doors off of Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. It wasn't a blowout, but Boise State on Friday night handling business against UNLV in the rematch to win the Mountain West and pretty much lock up a bye in the college football playoff. But then we got the SEC championship game with Carson Beck going out due to an injury and Georgia still winning. And then we got the final two Power Four games, conference championship games with Clemson looking like they were going to run away from SMU, and then pulling a the rabbit out of the hat there at the end, and Oregon staving off a comeback from Penn State. It was a fun day, man. It was a really fun finish. Not a fun day to be doing the projected rankings, which are now up on fansided.com. Please go check those out. But let's get into some 3 yards in a cloud of punt, and that means we're starting with a run. And I'm running with Georgia and Arizona State. Namely, the fact that I think of any two teams that won in conference championship weekend, I think those are the two teams that showed me the most. In the case of Georgia, you look at, I mean, honestly, frankly, you can start with the fact that they beat Texas twice. Now, there are certainly people out there who doubt Texas and what they're capable of. And I think that's, fair, especially with what Quinn Ewers and this offense have looked like at times. It's just a little discombobulated, a little sloppy on that side of the ball, more often than you would like for it to be. But for Georgia to lose Carson Beck right before halftime when you're trailing, bringing in Gunnar Stockton, who has not played in a game or had not played in a game when Georgia wasn't ahead by more than 3 scores, and to come back to force overtime and then to win in overtime with a defensive stop to force a field goal, and then Gunnar Stockton also getting knocked out. Carson Beck coming back in with one arm, handing the ball off to Trevor Etienne for the winning touchdown. I mean, that's a hell of a lot to show. And I will say, like, one thing that it's kind of a half-baked take, I would say, but coming out of that game, I do wonder if with the scar tissue that we've seen Carson Beck kind of accrue, and with what we saw Texas's defense be able to do to slow down Carson Beck in that first half, even, regardless of the injury, Carson Beck did not play particularly well in that first half. I wonder if Gunnar Stockton gives Georgia a little bit of an edge, at least early in the playoff, when teams do not have film on him. They aren't ready for maybe the added mobility that he has over Carson Beck. I'm not saying that Georgia's a better team without Carson Beck, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think experience does tend to outweigh a lot of things, especially in, big pressure moments, which, you know, whether or not he succeeded in all of them or not, Carson Beck's now been in a lot this season. Georgia's played the toughest schedule in the country to this point. And the fact that they're 11-2 and SEC champions, that's why they're going to be locked into the 2 seed. I do think that I don't know. I wonder if Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart might throw Gunnar Stockton into the mix a little bit, just to kind of mix things up. I mean, we didn't see Steve Sarkisian use Arch Manning really at all in the SEC championship game, and I think that was a mistake, frankly. The fact I like when Arch Manning came into the game against Texas A&M, it really caught the Aggies off guard, really put them on their heels. And I was wondering if you could do the same with Georgia and maybe play off those looks. Like they used Arch's legs a lot in the regular season finale against A&M. And I was wondering if maybe you play off of that and have Arch throw the ball a little bit when he comes into the game. Didn't do that, but I wonder if you could do the same, depending on, we don't know the status of Carson Beck. We know that the injury looked bad. He couldn't play in the second half. Seemed like it was something with his hand or his arm. Saw some people on Twitter slash the X speculating that it might have been a UCL injury, something similar to what Brock Purdy suffered for the 49ers last year. That's not good if that's the case. That means Gunnar Stockton's your starter. But if Beck is healthy, maybe you diversify those looks. But I also think that what Stockton showed is that he's a gamer, man. I I wouldn't count out Georgia with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback if he's the one who starts. And then on the flip side of that, I think, when Bueller and I were power ranking national championship contenders on Thursday's show, We both had Arizona State in like the bottom quarter or the bottom third. I might have them a little bit higher now. And part of that is the defense played really well. The defense really bottled up a lot of what Iowa State was trying to do. The game wasn't even as close as it looked in the final score because, Iowa State added a late touchdown when Arizona State already had the game very well in hand at that point. But I don't know many defenses that are going to be able to stop Cam Scatterbo at this point, man. That dude's a monster. Dude averaged over 10 yards per carry, 170 yards rushing, and three total touchdowns in this game. I mean, he has the juice. He has the goods. That's a dude who's going to be playing on Sundays next year. Selfishly, I hope it's for the Dallas Cowboys because that would mean A, they didn't reach on Ashton Genty to take a running back in the first round, which would be misguided if you're the Dallas Cowboys, in my opinion. But also, like, I just think he's a special player and one of those dudes that he may not test well, he may not have all the measurables, but you know what he knows how to do? He knows how to play football. And you know what else he knows how to do? He knows how to not get tackled. And he showed that again and again and again against an Iowa State defense today. And I'm not saying Arizona State is a team that I think is going to win the national championship because I don't think I'm there yet. Is this a team that can win a playoff game? Absolutely, man. I think Kenny Dillingham is a great coach. The turnaround of this program in 1 year when everyone was thinking it was actually going to get worse in Tempe, man, I mean, hats off to him, hats off to Scottaboo. But I'm firmly in the camp of believing in this Arizona State Sun Devils team now. I'm also a believer in one of the losers we saw today, and that'd be the Penn State Nittany Lions. When Oregon jumped out to an early lead in the Big Ten championship game, I think everyone kind of had the same reaction. Everyone who's been in tune with college football over the past half decade. And it was, oh God, here comes James Franklin in a big game again. He's just gonna, piss down his leg. No, Penn State didn't piss down anything, man. Yes, Drew Aller threw a back-breaking interception that was quite dumb to basically end any chances of a comeback. But they were coming back. They had every opportunity. The offense showed more life than I fully expected it to against this Oregon defense. And we got a shootout in a game that I was fully expecting us to hit the under because that's what we've seen from Penn State time and time again under James Franklin. We've seen the Nittany Lions come into these big games and basically play not to lose. They played to win tonight. And maybe that was part of the game script. Maybe getting behind early like they did, maybe that forced their hand a little bit. But the fact that they had that extra gear to hit, the fact that they got Oregon on their heels, that shows me a lot about this Penn State team. And I think that, considering that Penn State was in the top three of the college football playoff top 25 rankings last week, I think a one possession loss to Oregon, they're still going to be hosting a playoff game in the first round. Obviously, you're not getting the bye because you didn't win the Big Ten. But I still think they're going to be hosting. And Happy Valley's not an easy place to play. And I think this Penn State team is dangerous. More dangerous than I expected them to be because I think Drew Aller he's still imperfect. He's still got a lot of things to worry about. He's definitely coming back next year. And I think that's a big thing for Penn State because I mean, he's a much better quarterback than he was last year. Like I think they trust him more in this offense with Andy Kotelnicki than they did last year. And we see that. And I think the right wide receiver core is improved from last year. And I would suspect that that's going to be improved again next year. I'm assuming that's going to be a priority for James Franklin and this staff this offseason. But you also have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, who, when I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me in terms of how Penn State was able to come back in that game. You would think you get down by a couple of possessions and you start throwing the ball a little more. You start relying more on the pass game. And sure, they threw the ball plenty, but they also didn't abandon the ground game. They didn't abandon the two-headed monster that they have in the backfield. And they stayed true to who they were. And I think that shows a lot of moxie from the coaching staff and a lot of moxie from these playmakers on the Penn State offense. And then we know how good the defense is. Yeah, I didn't look at the night. You gave up 45 to Oregon, but like not every team that you're going to be playing in the playoff, even in the playoff, is Oregon. Not every team has the playmakers that Oregon does. And this defense has enough playmakers to A, come back against Oregon, make enough stops in the second half to be able to put yourself in a position to where you could tie the game. You could potentially go to overtime and win this game. Obviously, they didn't, but like they were in that position. Maybe the next time they get in that position, they don't turn the ball over. Maybe the next time they get in that position, they do force overtime. Maybe the next time they get in that position, they do win the game and they do advance. I just think that you look at this Penn State team, and they showed me quite a bit to make me think that there is a world where this doesn't necessarily end up with Penn State just being what we've expected them to be under James Franklin in the playoff, where they go into a big game and they turtle up. Because they didn't turtle up tonight. And I think that's why maybe I'm giving too much credit for something that's very like it's almost like a backhanded compliment. Like, congratulations, you didn't turtle up. But we know that the talent is there on this Penn State team. We know what the upside should be for Penn State. And I think we finally saw little flashes of that in a big game, in a big moment. That's what's been missing from this team. And so, yes, you lost. Yes, it's not good. But I'm still going to run with the fact that Penn State showed more fight than I expected them to in a situation where I thought it was pretty obvious that it looked like they were going to do the James Franklin Penn State thing. So hats off to them for being able to do that. And I will be watching them closely going into the playoff because I think that they are a team that definitely has the goods and definitely showed on Saturday night that they have more than enough juice to really make some noise. Let's put I think that's the best way to say it, to make some noise in the playoff. I'm not sure what noise that is. I'm not sure if that means it's a national championship. Probably not, but maybe. Who knows? It's been a weird college football season. Anything could happen at this point. And speaking of a weird college football season, I'm gonna pass on something that doesn't make me feel good about passing on it. Frankly, it's something I disagree with. SMU is not making the playoff. Frankly, I think that's BS. Frankly, I think SMU should be a lot to be in the playoff. I've been on beating this drum for quite some time. They had one loss, and it was to BYU. I saw someone put up, actually, it might have been ESPN. They put up a graphic of comparing SMU and Alabama's resume. And it was one of the talking points they had was record versus top 25 teams. Alabama is 3-1 against in those games. SMU was 0-1. Now they're 0-2 in those games. And I understand that. Let's look at the outside of the top 25. Let's look at outside the top 25 and see what they've done then. Oh, you're telling me that SMU is 11-0 in those games? You're telling me that Alabama is, hold on, math. They have two losses. That's all I'm getting at. You lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, two fringe bowl teams. I think that you have to weigh quality wins and quality losses the exact same, in my opinion. Yes, SMU may not have a win over a top 25 team. I frankly don't care. You handled your business. What's the difference between them and Indiana other than the fact that SMU actually made their conference championship game? That's not to disparage Indiana. I think Indiana is deserving of being in the playoff too. But the fact that we're talking about a three-loss Alabama team that's going to get in over SMU, and I say going to get in because it's going to happen. Look, maybe I'm just getting a little older in my mid-30s, getting more cynical by the day. But I don't care that SMU almost forced overtime and beat Clemson. The more I thought about it, the more I looked at what the committee has done, what they did to Florida State last year with how they operate so almost shamelessly in terms of what they're just trying to get the best television product, trying to appease the right people. Greg Sankey in this case. If SMU lost this game, I became convinced that Alabama was going to be in the playoff. I don't care that it was a last second field goal from Clemson. Also, hats off to Clemson. Based on Clemson's history, based on what Clemson's done for a lot of this season, as they allowed SMU to come back, I was like, oh Lord, this is going to absolutely be the Clemsoning of all Clemsonings. And SMU tied it up 31-31 in the final seconds of the game. Big return, nice Cade Klubnik pass. You drill a 56-yard field goal as time expires. Hats off to them for not completely choking that away. And Clemson's in the college football playoff now. And so now the debate becomes Alabama versus SMU. And if I'm debating that and looking at resume versus resume, it's SMU for me. You made your conference championship game. You won the games on your schedule. You won the easy games on your schedule. Alabama lost two of those easy games on their schedule. Sure, they have a win over SEC champion Georgia. I don't care. Your quality, your bad losses, in my opinion, should start to negate your quality wins, especially when you have three losses. Like, yes, you have a quality loss, but you also have two non-quality losses. SMU does not have a non-quality loss. They have two losses to top 25 teams. Point blank, period. That's where we're at. And I don't think that a team with that resume, even with the lack of high end wins, you still have a win over Duke. You have a win over Louisville. Even with what they've done, I just don't see a case to where you can value a three-loss Alabama over there. But I also know what this committee is going to do, and that is put Alabama in the playoff. I think that's wrong. I think it's unfair to Rhett Lashlee and and SMU. I keep wanting to say LSU. This is three-letter schools. It kills me. SMU doesn't deserve that. SMU is going to get screwed in this conversation. Completely unfair, but it's what's going to happen. And so I've got to pass on them making the playoff. And I will say that in the projected bracket, if you go and check it out on fansided.com, it does set up a pretty juicy little first round matchup with Alabama going on the road to face Ohio State. Might say there's some coaching pressure on the line there. Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Day probably didn't live up to expectations this year, I would say. Lose that first round game. Might have some unhappy boosters, might have some unhappy fans in the building. So would be interested to see that. Doesn't change the fact that it should be LSU, or I did it again. Should be SMU in that game. It's late. I apologize, everyone. And since it's late, I'm gonna go ahead and punt. And what I'm punting on is, dog, I don't know who's going to be the national champion. I don't know who you would consider the national championship favorite at this point. I really don't. If this college football season has taught us anything, it's that this is the most parity driven top to bottom college football season I think we've ever seen. The fact that we're having an Alabama versus SMU debate, the fact that the Big 12 championship and an automatic bid in the college football playoff was being decided between Arizona State and Iowa State, which Iowa State spot in there was decided by whether or not BYU won or lost against Houston in the final week of the regular season. It's just been pure chaos. Clemson winning tonight was pure chaos. Penn State almost beating Oregon would have caused even more chaos. Carson Beck going out for Georgia, more chaos. And they still win and beat Texas, who was a shoe-in for the number two seed had they, just capitalized on the fact that Georgia lost their starting quarterback. But you look at all these teams, and there's two things I like. I guess it's one big thing. I can look at every team that's going to be in this 12-team college football playoff, and for most of them, I can find you reasons why I think they could win a national championship. I think I would probably push back on Boise State and maybe probably Indiana based on what the Ohio State game looked like. Those reasons are a little bit harder to come by as to why they could win a national championship. But the flip side of that is I can come up with a lot of reasons why these teams can't win a national championship. Georgia's been highly inconsistent. Alabama's been highly inconsistent. We've seen Oregon play down to competition like Wisconsin, Idaho, Boise State. We've seen Oregon get in its own way, which I think they did at the end of this Penn State game in the Big Ten championship game. If I gesture over here, my TV's over here. That's why I'm gesturing it. That's where I watched it. But you look at Ohio State, lost to Michigan. You can lose to Michigan, you can lose to most any team in the country. Or, sorry, let me be clear, any good team in the country. You're not losing to Purdue. No offense. That's why they fired Ryan Walters. But you look at the rest of these teams, and it's just Texas has lost to Georgia twice. Granted, those are their only two losses, but with how inconsistent Quinn Ewers and this offense have been, they can absolutely lose a game that they probably shouldn't, especially based on the way their defense, how good their defense is. And you go down the list, and there's ways you can poke holes in every single one of these teams, even the high upper echelon like Oregon. Defense allowed 37 points to a Penn State team that Ohio State didn't let score a single touchdown in Happy Valley. We saw that happen. Now you're on a neutral site and you give up 37 if you're Oregon. It's not exactly what you want to see from that defense. I also still don't trust Dylan Gabriel, but that's probably a personal thing for me. Other people probably trust him a little more than I do. But you come down on all this, and it just looks like picking a national championship favorite right now, it just feels like a fool's errand. It feels like a lose-lose proposition because A, you're probably going to be wrong based on everything that this college football season has taught us. And B, like I said, you can poke holes in every single one of these teams that's going into the college football playoff right now. And that's a really weird spot to be in. But I will say, I'm punting on picking a favorite. That actually increases my excitement level for the college football playoff. With how crazy and how parity driven this season has been throughout the sport, I think it's the perfect time to have the first 12 team playoff. And I know there's plenty of people who think that, the 12 team playoff is stupid, that we should just go back to the BCS model, that we should, at minimum go back to the 14 playoff because, if we're debating if three-loss Alabama should be in the playoff, what's the system anyway? What are we doing here? And I understand that argument for sure. But at the same time, if I'm unwilling to crown anyone a national championship favorite, that means any one of these games could get sideways. Any one of these games could get crazy. Any one of these things could happen to create just mass chaos to determine a national champion. And, you think about it this way. Obviously, I'm wearing a North Carolina basketball shirt, big basketball guy as well. And you think about the excitement that fans feel when March Madness comes around. One of the biggest things in March Madness, well, two of the biggest things, actually, I think this is a 2 point part. First part is, I think path is going to be really key. Something Bueller was on when we were power ranking national champions. He was kind of looking at projected paths and who would have the easiest way to get there to like make a run, maybe build some momentum as a team. We see that all the time in March Madness. Who has the easiest path to the Final Four? Who has the, most workable path to the Final Four, or most advantageous even? Like the matchups just happen to favor a certain team. But the other thing about March Madness that we love is the upsets, the chaos of it all. Yeah, it sucks that when, a 13 seed beats a 4 seed that you had making a run to the Elite Eight when you're trying to fill out a bracket and win a bracket pool. Doesn't mean the game's not fun. Doesn't mean the game is not exhilarating, exciting, get the blood pumping a little bit. And I think we really have a chance to see that on a micro version in the 12-team playoff, especially with the way this college football season is shaped up, and especially with the way all 12 of these teams that are going to be in the playoff have flaws, have obvious, serious flaws that could ultimately keep them from winning a national championship. So it's going to be a lot of fun, man. And I'm excited to see what comes out on Sunday. But this was 3 yards in a cloud of punt after the conference championship weekend. Wild one at that. Please follow the show, subscribe on YouTube, leave us a comment. We love to engage, but if you subscribe, definitely let us know in the comments. We'll shout you out on the show. Love the subscribers, love the starters that come on show out for the show. Also follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and be sure to give us those 5 stars. We love those stars. Stars keep us going, stars keep the lights on. But we'll see you again on Monday talking about the College Football Playoff. I'm sure we'll have plenty to say after Selection Sunday. Be sure to check out all the work we're going to be doing at fanside.com. I can assure you there will be a lot of it. But until next time, this is Foster.